welcome to Visitas Guiadas con Historia or Seeghtsing with History. I'm the historian Paola Parra. I'm from the National University, also history teacher, and also I give history classes in high school and also at the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters at the National University. And today we're going to talk about the traditional division that we have here in Mexico about the Mexican history. And you have to remember that the history of Mexico is so old. For example, maybe we can say that we have more than 3,000 years old, more or less. And we have, of course, a pre-Hispanic period and also the colonial period and the independent moment when we got our independence from Spain. And also we can say that that moment also is divided in, for example, 19th century and 20th century. And again, for example, if you see different sources, books, webs, for example, also in internet and so on, you are going to see that, for example, the pre-Hispanic period is divided also in different moments. In Mexico, we call them the division, we call them the horizontes culturales, or cultural horizons or divisions, that depends, for example, maybe the National University or the National School of Anthropology, or maybe also they have their own division, but in general we can say that also the pre-Hispanic period is divided in four or three different moments: the pre-classic, the classic, and the post-classic. And for only the central area of Mexico, also we have the epi-classic. That is I call it like a sandwich period between the classical and the post-classical period, yeah? And also, for example, it's not the same time, or it's not the same moment, we can say, when, for example, the Mayas, who lived, for example, before Jesus Christ, or after or before our era, no, is different. The moment of that part of the Mexican history, if we compare it with the Mexica or Aztec moment, for example. For example, the Mayas, or the civilization of the Mayas, they live during the three periods: the pre-classic, classic, and post-classic. And as you know, for example, if you travel to Mexico, for example, to Cancun, no, to Yucatan and so on, or Tulum, you are going to see that, for example, we have archaeological zones, no, in the Maya area, of course, and it's amazing. But it's not the same, for example, Tulum, no, and Chichen from, for example, Palenque, no, or Uxmal. They were creative in different moments. Some of them, for example, during the classical moment, and the others during the post-classical. Yeah. So it's different. So, for example, we can say that also it's not the same, for example, or they didn't live at the same time, for example, the Teotihuacan people, no, or the Teotihuacan civilization, they didn't live at the same time of the Mexicas or Aztecs, for example, no. The Aztecs, they came after, but many centuries after, yes, when the Teotihuacan city collapsed or had their ending, yeah, it was very, very different. So imagine in this case, for example, all the history, no, and all the changes that Mexico have had during all these centuries. And of course, for example, after the Spanish conquest, after the 1521, we started a new moment, the colonial period. But I prefer to say other word because we weren't exactly a colony, for example, until the 18th century, maybe yes, but before, during the 16th and 17th centuries, we were like a kingdom, part of the great empire of the Spanish Empire, no? But in this case also we had a specific name that was the New Spain, and the New Spain was a part of the Spanish Empire, but like a kingdom, not exactly like a colony. During the first 2 centuries, for example 16th and 17th centuries, that we were part of this Spanish Empire, we were ruled by a specific royal house, we can say, no? Or we can say in this case that were the Austrias or the Habsburg, yes, and in this case they were ruling Spain and of course, for example, Latin America. As you know, we have a viceroy, and we had the viceroy was like, for example, a kind of kingdom, not specifically, no, but he represented the king of Spain in the New World. Yeah, and for example, also we had the viceroyalty from the Peru, for example, or the one that was at Colombia or Argentina and so on. Yeah? And they were different, of course, of us. In this case also we have to say that after Spain had a struggle between the Habsburg and the Bourbon, who were the new royal house that started to rule Spain after the 18th century, and during the 18th century, of course, the vision that in this case the kings of Spain had about us changed a little bit. Yes, and for example, during the Bourbon house, we were considered like a colony in this case, not like a kingdom that we were considered during the Habsburg house, yeah, or the Austrias, yeah. And after that, we were here, or we had 3 centuries where the Mexican culture, with all the rich things, items, and so on that we have nowadays, started to grow up. Imagine that during these 3 centuries, for example, the Prehispanic cultures continued in one way, no, but also the Catholic, for example, religion, and also different cultures from Asia, also from Africa, and of course Spain started to be mixed, and also with the indigenous cultures. So in this case we can say that the Mexican point of view started in that moment. For example, the food, no, for example, cultural activities that we have nowadays started in that moment. And after we got our independence in 1821, after 10 years of a struggle, yes, we got the freedom from Spain, we started this very chaotic, we can say, century that was the 19th century, because we had a lot of wars, not only between Mexicans, also against, for example, foreigners from other countries, France, USA, and so on. Yeah, and in this case it was very, very rich also, the culture that was created during the 19th century, and more specifically in a political point of view, for example, also. And the idea of the Mexican nation, for example, started in that moment. Before that moment, the idea of Mexico, it wasn't so clear. Maybe a little bit during the New Spain, maybe. Of course, before, never in the life, of course not, it wasn't. But in the 19th century, we can say that during the movement of the Romanticism, for example, of the 19th century also, that it means a love, for example, or a proud, because of the nation, for example, also it was here in Mexico, no? And after also we have a very important moment, no? The government of Benito Juárez, for example, in that case, and after him, the government of 30 years, that was the ruling of Porfirio Díaz. And after him, for example, we start the 20th century. And the 20th century also, it was very important in the Mexican history, no? Because also we inaugurated, we can say we started the century of the revolutions with the Mexican Revolution in 1910, you know, and it finished more or less in 1920. Other historians or colleagues say that maybe it finished in 1930, more or less. Well, officially we can say that have 10 years old, more or less, the Mexican Revolution, yes. And after that, for example, all the 20th century was the ruling of one political party, the PRI, we call it in Spanish, with different presidents, And also during the 2000, with the changing of a new century, we started with a new government. Another, for example, political party got a power, yes, or reached, for example, the presidential chair that we say here in Mexico, no? And we started with other part of the Mexican history. As you can see, the Mexican history really is very important, very rich, and we can say that we had a very valuable or a very important geographical place in America. America, of course, the continent, no? Because we were in the middle of Asia and in the middle of Europe. And the good things, the excellent good or the excellent things that we could get from both areas of the world were mixed here. And also from here started something new. So the New Spain, and of course now Mexico, is a very important place that if you want to visit, please enjoy it, because we have something excellent if we talk about museums, archaeological zones, churches, palaces, you know, squares or plazas, food and so on. Yes, it's very important. I think that also we have one or two, maybe or more, of the most important civilizations in the world, like for example the Mayas, or for example the Mexicas or Aztecs, no, and the luxurious, for example, churches and palaces, the Baroque palaces that we have here, no, in Puebla, in Mexico City, in Zacatecas, in Guanajuato, and so on. So if you want to come here and to see or to know more about the Mexican history, write us. Yes, and also if you want to visit Mexico City, or for example archaeological zones that are very near, that for example are Teotihuacan and so on, write us also, because one of our team that we are historians or archaeologists, we can explain and we can share with you with pleasure. So please follow us here and subscribe here at our YouTube channel, and also follow us in Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. See you. Have an excellent day, guys, girls and boys. Bye.